So thank you for coming on to the show, and thank you for wanting to talk about the Synod. Well, not really the Synod, but more so about some of the topics that may come up in the Synod, particularly when it comes to young Catholics. And by young Catholics, I want to mean young adult Catholics and those in college. But before we go into our topic today, can you tell me who you are and what do you do?
Nice to meet you. Those who know. Those who don't. Well, my name is Kierstin Richter. I'm the editor for the Catholic Connection, so it was a really long walk over here all the way from the other side of the hall. I grew up in Shreveport. I grew up Catholic with a very Catholic family, had a very good upbringing here within the church. No complaints there. Good. I went to public school all my life, so apparently that comes as a shock working here sometimes, because I've talked to people and they're like, what, you went to public school? I'm like, yes, I went public school all the way.
Well, you're also recently out of college.
I like to think recently. I like to think that I just graduated, but then it comes to my attention that I've been out for about 3 years. Almost 4 years.
I still consider that recent.
I mean, if you talk to anybody else that's like, like real grown-ups, then like, oh yeah, I'm just out of college. But whenever I do the math, I'm like, oh, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while, and especially since it's interesting for me whenever I go on Facebook and see those that were a freshman while I was a senior.
And now they're in like med school.
Now they're in med school, they're in grad school.
Like, wait, you're not supposed to be
this old. They're working, and you're just like, you were in my orientation group. Like, I'm proud of you, but like, you have
you're
like 3
really
more years.
Old now.
Yeah. And so one of the reasons why we bring up college into the mix of this is that I think from both of our experience, and when I spoke with Carl as well, and a lot of other college-aged Catholics and young adults, that college is a very trying time when it comes to your faith and keeping up with your faith, or just whatever your beliefs are, whether you be Catholic or Muslim, Protestant, or, flat earth, whatever, that it's a kind of a battleground, I guess. Mm-hmm. So to start off this discussion, why do you think Catholics in college leave the church?
I don't think it's like this cognitive decision, like right off the bat, like, okay, now that I'm out of this house, I'm never going back to church. I've been repressed. Like, I don't think it's usually like that. I mean, sometimes, yeah. But most of the time, I feel like people go off to college and they aren't with their home parish anymore. And like, Mass has always been like a family thing. Like, you go to Mass, you go get trejos after, you go out to eat, and it's always like a family affair. So like, going by yourself seems a little odd, especially if it's like every single week, and you kind of have less accountability in that way, that like you have to be the one to is your chair okay?
Sorry, I was moving my chair.
But yeah, I mean, it's really up to you. So like whenever I was in college, especially my freshman year, I feel like my dad had like telepathy, and he was thinking like, oh man, Kirsten's probably going out tonight. I should probably text her and remind her to go to Mass so that she doesn't make bad decisions today. And it worked. I mean, you have like that Catholic guilt over your head too. Like, I gotta be a good Catholic kid. But he would text me every week and remind me like, oh, don't forget about Mass. And at first I was like, oh my goodness, like, how could you think that I would ever forget to go to Mass? And then as college goes on, I'm like, man, yeah, I gotta go. But yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a struggle trying to stay in the Catholic mindset whenever you don't have your family around you, like, I guess, supporting that. And I think that was something that I was really grateful for growing up, was that we didn't just go to Mass every Sunday and never talk about it again. Like, we had discussions about the faith and why we believed what we believed. It wasn't just like something that we did and like never talked about. It was something that, it was a very like authoritative parenting style. So you have authoritarian, which is just like, it's my way or the highway. This is just the way it is. Sorry. And I think a lot of the people who grow up with that are typically the ones that rebel. And they're like, well, I don't know why we believe this anyway. This seems kind of dumb. And everybody else out here seems to be having a lot of fun doing anything else. So I think that discussion growing up really helped with that and going into college, because I went to Mass every Sunday during college. I wasn't always quite awake for it. I was tired and maybe I wasn't paying attention, but I was there. But yeah, I think it's easy to kind of slip off.
Mm-hmm. And I think you highlight a big reason why people leave the church, and to point out that it's, sometimes it is a conscious decision of, man, I hate the Catholic Church for X, Y, and Z, or I'm never going back to Mass, or I don't want to go back to Mass, or whatever. But then sometimes it is just this, subconscious, I'm tired, I don't want to go to Mass, and, 1 week becomes 2 weeks, 2 weeks becomes a month becomes a year, and sooner or later, you're just going to Mass on Christmas and
Mm-hmm.
Easter. And so I think it's interesting to hear from you, especially that, with your upbringing in a Catholic family where it didn't just stop at the church, at Mass, that you were talking about it and having discussions about it after Mass, that is really important. And that's something that Carl and I talked about last time, was that you can't just leave it at the door. Mm-hmm. But from what you've told me as well, it's not something that it's a one and done thing. Like, okay, I'm going to be Catholic forever. Like, you constantly need that community. And so when you went to college, what was it like? Like, were you in any sort of, sorority? Were you in any sort of like Greek life or organization? Were you part of like the Catholic Student Association? What was that like?
Well, the first thing I did whenever I first toured the university, the first place I went with my mom was the Catholic Student Center, because that was the first place that I was like, I'm definitely going to be here. This is where I'm going to be all 4 years. So I go and I visit, and I just felt kind of weird. It seemed there were only guys there, and they were all like playing video games. They were just hanging out, like having a good time. But I did not feel like I fit in very much, but also because they had a dog there and I accidentally kicked it and it slid across the room. And
I'm sure a lot of Catholics resonate with this.
Well, I felt really bad and I was like, oh my goodness, they're not going to want me back here. So I ended up seeing the guy who owned the dog later on, and I don't know if he ever remembered, but I probably made some awkward comment like, oh yeah, I kicked your dog. And he was like, what? And I just made it bad for myself. But so that being said, whenever I came to college, I did not really go to the Catholic Student Center, and maybe like once for a dinner or something because there was free food. But really, I would just go to Mass by myself. Like, it wasn't a community thing. It wasn't until then, like my freshman year, I rushed a sorority. I got really involved with Greek life, with all, like, everybody, with the fraternities, sororities, everything. And it was really fun, and I made a lot of really good friends that way. And there were a lot of Catholic people within my sorority because a lot of the girls were from South Louisiana. And I rushed a sorority. I hung out with the fraternities. Like, I had all of my friends were pretty much Greek friends, and it was really fun. And I don't think I went off the deep end or anything, but I wasn't like super focused on the Catholic. I was still like upholding my Catholic values, but wasn't really talking to people about it. And it wasn't until my sophomore year, whenever Focus came to our campus, and they kind of like made Catholicism cool again, I guess. And they like redid the Catholic Student Center, and they brought a lot of Greeks in because part of Focus's initiative, one of their sections of their ministry is Focus Greek, and it is specifically targeted towards like reaching out to Greek students. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. So I joined a Bible study, and it was really cool. And I went to that for a while, and one of my friends decided to become Catholic that was within our friend group, and I became her sponsor. So I think that kind of like got the ball rolling. But I still felt like I didn't quite fit into the Catholic student group, but then I also didn't completely fit into the Greek group. So I was kind of like boundary spanning, not really sure where I fit in, and which I guess is okay. I guess I didn't get cliquey. but it was still kind of uncomfortable. So I guess like my Catholic experience in college, and the same goes for high school, because like I went to youth group sometimes and I was in a girls group and it was great, but everybody there was at like Loyola together. So, and I was at Byrd and maybe knew like one person from school. So I didn't feel like we were really friends outside of that. And the same kind of goes for college, where everybody else kind of had their cliques and I was just kind of like focusing on my faith on a personal level. And I didn't want to go to the campus church that everybody else was at, because like I saw everybody that I knew. So I ended up going to a different church that was like 20 minutes outside of town, and it was kind of like my escape. So my faith wasn't really community based as much as it was just like a personal journey, which was cool, but eventually you need friends.
Yeah, and I think that's something of a balancing act for Catholics, is that we're all going to be in situations where we're not going to have Catholic friends, or maybe we don't feel comfortable with not even just Catholic, like Christian friends, or like just, good people in general, or people that want to talk about those things. And it's going to be a very isolating experience sometimes. I think that's just with anything, like going to the gym for me, like in college, I used to have a whole lot of friends that we would go work out, and now I'm just kind of all alone. Not to play the sad violin music or anything like that. But, I think that's something that when I was in college and I looked at, I was in the Catholic Student Association, and I was in it for 4 years and, did the things and became president. And then when Focus came over, they specifically, like you said, they specifically have a ministry for Greek life. And I almost got kind of, upset about that there's specifically something for Greek Catholics, and not the Italian Catholics, no.
Not the same thing.
No, but that, because for me at my college, pretty much Greek students were always in everything. Mm-hmm. They were the quote-unquote popular kids. They were in the student government. They were always, becoming homecoming queen, or doing this or that, or getting this award or that award. And so to me, it almost kind of felt as though, like, why are we reaching out to those that are well? But
we were not well.
But as you clearly stated, that even going to your Catholic Student Association, you didn't feel, not that like you weren't welcome, but that someone like you wasn't there.
Yeah, well, like it's kind of like whenever you're a part of a group and you show up to like the talk or the trivia night or whatever, and you got a whole bunch of people around you and you're kind of making small talk, and that's cool. But once it turns to, okay, everybody find a partner, then you're like, I don't have one. I don't know, because everybody has like a go-to person. And I think the only times that I ever like had people there with me that I was like, I had like a person that I was there with, is if like I was dating someone and we went there once or twice, so I mean, like that was short-lived, so it wasn't going to be all through college.
Well, I think that's an important aspect of the Catholic faith, and especially in college, and Carl and I talked about this as well, is that, you can be part of all these clubs and organizations, but you also need to find someone, who is of your own beliefs too. Mm-hmm. Because, even though I was part of the Catholic Student Association, I didn't really feel like I was one of the members. And I was the president at one point. I had friends who were not Catholic who enjoyed, going on 3 a.m. runs to Waffle House, or like going and, working out, playing tag, whatever. And, I didn't find someone like me at that Catholic Student Association. And it's one of those things that, we look to the church as this very universal place of, we have, we have Black Catholics, Hispanic Catholics, we have Coptic Catholics, we have Catholics who only go to church once a year, mystic Catholics, traditional Catholics, all this stuff. And then when it comes to college and you go to the Catholic Student Association, there's usually maybe only one type of people there. Mm-hmm. And so I think that community and relationship is really important Because man is not an island. And if you can't grow in your faith unless you have someone with you to do it as well. Or at least it comes easier that way. But that's college. And as we talked about, with community and the importance of community, I think sometimes we as recent college grads find it hard immediately after we graduate, because kind of here is this, greenhouse that we're living in of, we have the campus church, we have adoration, we have, a priest we can go to all the time, or we have a Catholic group, we have a good Bible study or whatever, and then we get a job and we go to somewhere new, and it's like we have to start all over again. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, maybe then that's where people drop off. I don't know. What's your experience with that?
I mean, I definitely think so. And whenever I graduated, I had also graduated in the fall. So it wasn't even a time where I felt like, with summer, it seems like there's like a start of something new. It's starting a new year. But it was kind of in the middle of the year. I graduated early, and I was kind of missing my friends because, I still had a semester that I could have gone, I was getting paid to go to school. I could have stayed there. I was just, I guess, ready to go. And whenever I left, it was just kind of like in the middle of a sentence. So I kept going back to my college town to go and visit more and more, and kind of getting sucked back into the same drama and stories. And it was kind of like a TV show. I wanted to keep coming back. But because where I had moved over to the Dallas area. And I thought okay, this is where I get my job with my psych degree, which was not going to happen. I was interviewing for some jobs, and I was just man, I just can't find anything here. And I must really be a failure because anybody can get a job in a big city. I still needed to go to grad school, but I wasn't really sure what direction I was going in. So I was already kind of floundering there, not really sure what my life was going to look like, who I was going to be, because that was still the point where I thought, okay, my life is defined by my job. My life is defined by what I do, which later found out that's not really true. You can still just be a person. But since I was in this whole new place, I knew no one. I knew one person, but the only reason that I knew them was through music festivals and stuff like that, which had nothing to do with church. So that didn't really get to count as far as getting back into a Catholic group goes. But I also it was really difficult to get into the churches over there because they were very big. Everything's bigger in Texas. And I just didn't have that same homey feeling. And I really missed that because whenever I would go to mass back home or back in my college town, I had to drive 20 minutes through fields and cows and pretty trees and the big open sky. And it was just almost a meditative experience every single time I got to go to mass because it was just tranquil and quaint. And I loved the pastor out there. And then whenever you leave, it's just all unknown and you don't feel connected to it. So you find yourself kind of dozing off in mass and you're well, I don't have any friends here. I'm not going to go to any groups. And then you just kind of start wondering, is it even worth it for me to go anymore? And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people stop going to mass is, like I said, not even because they decide that they don't even believe in God anymore, but it's just kind of can't I just be spiritual but not religious, and I don't have to worry about fitting into a group? And I think that's something that I've heard from a lot of people too, that, why can't I just do things on my own? Why do I have to go to a place? What's the importance of the mass? And I think we kind of get into this mode where we're only just going through the motions. And whenever you do that, you don't know, why are you even there? There's a grace in being there, but
well, that's something
how are you growing?
Right. Well, that's something that with you and I talked about before when we attended this most recent Seek that was put on by Carl, that, if you do things alone, because when I moved to Jackson for work, Jackson, Mississippi, you're right, finding community in a big city, you think, wow, there's so much opportunity, there's so many good things, it's a big city, I'm going to find something. But that's being dropped off in the ocean. it would almost have been better to just, be dropped off in a pond and at least people there. But now you have to actively find people. And, people in the city, sometimes, they're very focused on work or, everywhere else. But, I was in a similar situation with that where, I was just going to church. There was a young adult group, but that was the first time I was like, yeah, I'm going to go because Catholics and we're going to relate. And I went to it and I go, yeah, we're Catholic, but I don't relate to them. And so then I stopped going. And the only thing I had to my name with, the Catholic Church was Mass and adoration. I knew no one there that was Catholic. And that, or I knew people who were Catholic, but I didn't, you get what I mean.
I get what you mean.
So we understand that community is really important. I mean, and that's with really anything. And, I think we find community through a lot of different ways, whether that be online, whether that be, watching a YouTuber you really like, or, TikTok. And that's, people cling to that because it kind of helps their personality as well as help their values. And especially when it comes to the Catholic faith, as we just talked about, with finding Catholics that you relate to in college, that may or may not be in the Catholic Student Association, as well as, post-grad. But, there's not only the communal aspect to the church, because as we talked about, there are going to be times where Christ calls us to, go and make disciples of the nation, of all nations. And I don't, we have missionaries for that, obviously, but there's also us who need to know the faith. And so I think that's something that in our pre-interview, we talked about how that cradle Catholics need a reconversion at some point early in their life. Have you ever had something like that for you?
I think that was definitely with my, junior-ish year of college. I think that's whenever I had gone to my first Focus conference. And even though I wasn't really hanging out with the other people that came from our school, I was just kind of a lone wolf on that front. I hung out with one of the missionaries sometimes, but for the most part, I wasn't sitting with them. I was going to my own sessions, and I was just kind of going at it alone. But I think after that, and hearing people with PhDs and priests and all of these people talk about topics that really pertain to real life is whenever I kind of had that reconversion, because I think you can grow up for a long time just believing what you do about the church before you even hit reality. And then all of a sudden you're confronted with all of these different perspectives and beliefs in college, and people not really understanding why you believe what you believe. And if you don't know why, then you just, at least for me, I always assumed that everybody else is smarter than me. I assumed that everybody else has read more, watched more videos, had more life experiences that makes their opinion more valid. And I have to remind myself, wait, you've read 7 books on this. You're just as qualified. But I think that's one of those things that I think young adults, especially young adults, including post-grad, college, and even into high school, is that we need practical instructions, basically. We need to talk about the tough topics that usually we don't talk about in Mass because, there's kids there, and, maybe you don't want to be talking about sexuality or whatever, or birth control or any of those things. But a lot of those things are the things that people disagree on in the church. And I think that's just because there isn't any explanation. It's just kind of well, you're Catholic, that's the way we do things. So I think my reconversion really happened more with the understanding of how Catholicism applies to my daily life. And I think that's what people need. And that's what I really appreciated about my pastor back in my college town, was that he was extremely candid. He was very loving, and he was very witty and sarcastic, but he was very good at what he did. And we have priests like that here too, that really just, they tell it how it is. And I think that's something that really helped me, because whenever I would go to other parishes for Mass, because maybe I didn't wake up in time to get to the one Mass that this church had on Sundays, it's almost like I just kind of zoned out during the homily and during everything else, that I was kind of going there like for a message. Like I was going there like for nourishment, for food. And if I wasn't getting it, then I was like, well, I went to Mass. That's great.
I think that's something that a lot of Catholics struggle with, is that, Christian Pilates, just sit down in the pew, stand up, sit down, kneel, stand up, walk, sit down. And that's kind of their Sunday, I can't tell you in the past, like 2 months, I can't tell you what the homily was for this past Sunday, and I think that's something that we might lose Catholics on as well, because kind of going back to our organizations and clubs, and as that relationship that people have, it works both ways. It's not just, we as Catholics are reaching out to our non-Catholic friends or previous Catholic friends, and we're like, hey, come to Mass. But they're also doing it as well. The Baptist Student Union at my college, they were on fire with what they were doing. I mean, you had Catholics who did not go to the Catholic Student Association for X, Y, and Z, but they went to the Baptist Student Union because they had dinners, they had people who reached out to them and honestly probably cared about them a lot more than we did, and engagement, And I think that's something that, when we go to Mass, the Mass is beautiful. And like you said, there's so much that we need to learn about the church, and not just have like an 8th grade understanding of this is why we do what we do, but rather more of an understanding of everything so that we can find the beauty in it. And so I guess from what I'm hearing from you, some of the practicalities of, helping us cradle Catholics, especially college Catholics and post-grad Catholics, is, having a reconversion and learning how to be a practical Catholic. Kind of like what you said, that social Catholic teaching of birth control, abortion, homosexuality. I've only heard maybe 2 homilies that I can remember in my 26 years of living that were on abortion, and maybe 1 that was on homosexuality. And yet every single day that I went to college, I would find someone who is homosexual or believed in birth control or this, that, and the other. So, but is there anything else that you think that is important for us cradle Catholics?
Well, I think, and this is more directed towards pastors and those who are giving the homilies, less so Catholic. Well, they're Catholic, but they're the lay people. But with those, couple homilies that actually addressed some of those hot button topics, there is one that I can think of in particular, and I think that you can remember it too, but it was very fire and brimstone. And whenever we talk about these things, like, Catholics are not fire and brimstone. Like, we're pretty introverted, we're pretty chill, I think, but like approaching those hot button topics with love and care and support for, like, if somebody were to be listening that has experienced any of those things, they're not going to feel completely alienated and ostracized and attacked. And I think that sometimes we can just be a little tone deaf with the way that we talk about things as Catholics, because we assume that, everybody's kind of on the same page as us, and we forget that, like, people are people and life happens. And I think that is something that, even if pastors were not to talk about it in their homilies, because I understand there are some things that are more geared towards more mature ears, and you probably don't want a 3-year-old going and repeating things that you said, but having more opportunities of talks and seminars and sessions outside of Mass, because that's something that I had done. I think I was a junior in high school, and the cathedral had hosted Christopher West, and he gave a talk on theology of the body, and it blew my mind. It was incredible. And I think that was, like, definitely a turning point in my faith, that it's like everything was bright and shiny and made sense again. And everything that I had learned just, like, really made sense. And everything kind of built off of that after that year. But having more opportunities like that for people to openly discuss things that typically we shy away from, because the Mass is beautiful just as it is. The homily is, from what I've been told, the least important part of the Mass. But I think it's still important, because for those who maybe are dozing off that day in Mass, for those who haven't quite come to the understanding of the importance of the Mass, you still need a way to keep them in. And I think a good way to do that is the homily, and, reach people where they're at. And I mean, obviously, whenever you have to write a homily every single week, I'm sure it gets tiring, and I'm sure you're just like, maybe I should just find one off the internet. I don't know. But I think that's definitely something that would be helpful to focus on, especially for reaching out to young adults or high schoolers, or those who are on the verge of potentially leaving. And not like formally leaving, like telling the bishop, I am formally resigning from the Catholic Church, because like people don't typically do that unless they like really have a bone to pick. But people just kind of fade off and stop coming. And because whenever I was in high school, I really liked Father Peter's homilies. And the reason that I liked them was because it kind of felt like a lecture. And it felt like I would literally bring a notebook to Mass with me, because I wanted to take notes. Like, he was talking about Gnosticism, he was talking about different branches of philosophy. And I felt like I was not only having an excellent experience in Mass, but also a learning experience to help me grow and then go learn more things and then come back with a new, renewed understanding. And I just really like that. But that's also like, I was a teacher's pet, a nerd in high school. So
I don't know. I think Catholics resonate with that, because sometimes, homilies, you're preaching to the masses. Who is in the congregation? Is it someone who is a gambling addict? Is it someone who has been scorned by the church and is coming back for the very first time? And I think you're right. It's something that we may shy away from those conversations for, maybe because we don't know how to talk about it, and maybe that's something that we need to talk about. But I think, we want to learn. We want to know, why is it that we believe these things? Because ultimately, we will be asked, and we will be tested on those things, whether that is external from a friend, coworker, someone who's just passing by, or whether that is within ourselves when we ask ourselves, why do we go to Mass? So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Happy to be here.